I worked at child support. So the whole job of a child support officer is to look at a calculator. I mean, aside from the locate and the cheek swabs for the genetic tests and whatever, the calculator is just this thing on my screen that you have to know. And on this side, you put in his income. On that side, you put in her income. And then this is the custody. And then there's, various other things, whatever your mortgage interest or something. But for the most part, that's the core of it. And so for 5 years, I look at this calculator, and if two people make the same income and it's 50% custody, that's zero. Nobody owes each other anything. If you're a guy and she makes more money, she might have to end up paying you depending on what custody is, or especially for alimony, that's going to be different. So I read thousands of divorce orders and child support orders, and I just looked at the calculator. I looked at what people were doing. I saw whose divorces seemed to be the worst, who seemed to be at least manageable. Like if I had to get divorced, who would I be? Mm-hmm. And the people that seem to be married to people who make around the same income seem to have the most, easy, amicable divorces. If you're not going to have that, and she's not going to make money, and you're going to make a lot of money, at least not be married to her, because there's a difference.
I don't think I had a single. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I had a divorce story that was super bad from two people making the same.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I'm sure they're out. I mean, we've seen.
There's the emotional nightmare part.
Yeah. I mean, they'll cheat. They'll cheat at work.
That part sucks, but at least, you'll have, here's the thing. If you're going to end up getting divorced, you guys make around the same. And I've always read this in orders. What will happen is both parties usually agree to terminate spousal support. So the court will write, court terminates jurisdiction to award spousal support. And then that's it. They might set child support to zero, and they might just figure out custody on their own. Now, later on, that could be an issue, and she might say, I want to keep custody from him, and they'd have to go through that. But at least you have money to fight for custody. At least you're not paying. Imagine paying alimony, paying child support. We're fast. Even if your divorce isn't complete yet, you'll be paying child support. You're paying all this, and then somewhere along the line, you got to figure out how to fight for custody. And, there's a lot of custody horror stories out there to where a guy spends over $100,000 just to get some small percentage of custody. So it's all, kind of a Pyrrhic victory there. So yeah, on the job, I'm looking at this and I'm just like, man, I'm hearing stuff in the space, and on the one hand, tradcons are saying this. I'm like, oh no, that's bad. You even get red pill guys will say, oh no, we want this, we want that. The guy should make all the money and do that. Okay, fine if that's what you want, but if you sign a marriage contract, get the marriage license, not even a real contract anymore. Now it's just the family codes. Reading marriage contracts from the past are very interesting, but that's another thing. If you take that deal, I mean, it's just, how can you even complain later when you get screwed over?
Yeah, so if you do take the deal, what's worse if you have a stay-at-home?
Stay-at-home are the worst.
Tell me if you're at the same income, what you're gonna pay. Or versus if you have a how much more money am I? Let's say I make $100K a year.
Yeah.
How much more money am I spending if I marry a woman that also makes $100K or she makes zero?
If she also makes $100K, I think that would be the ideal situation, because it's a similar contribution. You guys have probably put the same into the house. But as far as alimony, what will likely happen is that you guys will just both agree that there's no alimony, and for the court to just waive jurisdiction. That's what I saw in most of the judgments. So on most of the divorce and dissolution judgments I read, when the incomes are like that, more than likely they had written that in there. It was like standard language.
The same income.
About the same or about this, around or, it's just depending. Sometimes even if she was higher, men were just more or less likely to take alimony, even if they could have got it.
Yeah.
But typically if it's about the same, they'd say, okay, you keep your retirement, I keep my retirement, no alimony. And there might be some small amount of child support if he's like, okay, you know what? I actually can't keep them this amount of time, or she's like, I can't. I'll pay a little bit of that. And then the house would either get split or somebody would buy each other out. And they were typically the most amiable divorces. I've seen a lot of nightmare ones where it's just sitting at my desk, I just cannot be the guy that gets the worst end of this. It does not matter. It doesn't matter who cheated on who, whatever it is. You asked me earlier about worst cases. I didn't work this one specifically, but my coworker in the cubicle next to me, the case was so bad, I heard him on the phone, he had to put it down and stand up and come talk to me because he needed to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And this was somebody who was, he was married to the woman, and I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 kids. But they got divorced, and, this was after probably 5-6 years or whatever. In California, you have 2 years to challenge. So he owed child support. The reason it came to my coworker's desk was he worked on a special arrears unit for people who owed a lot of money. And this guy just refused to pay, okay? And so when he called him up, and he was like, why don't you want to pay anything? He's like, because the kids are not mine, and she's living with her ex-boyfriend who is the real father. So she got married to this guy, cheated on him in the marriage, had these kids, divorced him. We're requiring him to pay child support into this house, and she's now living with the kids with this previous ex-boyfriend who is the actual father, and this guy is paying money into their household. It's like a forced slavery. So yeah, he put the phone down. He came to me and he was like, if it was me, I'm like, yeah. He's like, I don't want to say it if it was me. I was like, yeah, I get it. Don't worry. So yeah, that's just there are some real nightmare situations like that, but.
So what's the difference in child support or alimony versus someone that had, let's say the custody's 50-50, one was a housewife, one made the same?
Well, let's say, okay, if it's a housewife too, typically, she'll probably get most of the custody. But let's say a guy's making, it's $8,000 a month, about as a gross income. Let's say it's worst case scenario, whatever. She says you were violent, you get kicked out of the house, you got no custody, you're fighting this, the divorce hasn't even gone through, child support's already involved because she went straight to the child support agency. You would be paying about 25% of your net income. So the calculator would figure in the taxes for the $8,000. It would probably be about $5,300 or so is going to be net. And then you'd probably be paying about $1,500 or so just off rip. If it's around the same income and custody's the same, it would be 0. And even if it's 50-50, I don't know what it would be off the top of my head, but it would be less than that amount. So I recommend people to play around with their state child support guideline calculator. In some states, California is pretty bad. People know that. There's interest on arrears. New York is pretty tough. Florida, you remember, I don't know if it's okay to bring up, but there was a Fresh and Fit, and there was that possible baby story. There in Florida, and she went back to New York, and she was saying very publicly that, he's not helping me, and he kicked me out. Basically, because of his actions, she had to go back to New York. When I saw that, that's a very specific thing legally, because, sorry if this is off topic, but it's just something important to know. There are very specific laws where if you have let's say you're in a state where child support might be less, and then she's here living with you, and then you guys have a kid, and then she leaves and goes back to live with her parents. She can argue that because of his directives, I had to go back to California. So it means that California has jurisdiction to make the order, so it's a higher order. So that's what you saw with New York versus Florida. That's what she was trying to do. I always thought she talked to an attorney or something like that. But so there's all these little stupid rules and games, but a lot of it can be negated by, if you're gonna have a kid with somebody, have one with somebody who at least has some kind of job or career. I know a lot of people don't like that. Tradcons don't like that. Even red pillars don't like that because they, the women aren't supposed to do that or whatever. I'm just looking at it from what I saw in the papers.
25% though, that was for the same income or the housewife?
That was for the housewife.
Okay, so
it would be less. It would be less for someone who's working.
Okay, so someone that was working, it might be. Could I get a range? I know it depends.
I say it'd be anywhere from 0. It depends on custody. Okay. If you have 0% custody, you'd still pay about that 25%.
Okay, so if you got nothing, it would be the same.
Yes.
But you're more likely to get nothing if she's a housewife.
Yeah, because she's just been there.
Yeah.
A lot of it goes off the relationship with the child. And it's weird because it's like you come home every night and see the kid, but they're going to be like, okay, she's been at home with the kids. So they're going to be more likely to give it to her. She doesn't have a job now. So you're going to be paying alimony. You're going to be paying the bills on the house. You might be ordered to do that. While they're trying to figure out what happens to this. You're going to be paying an additional child support. And they may or may not tell her to try to find a job, probably not. The only time they might do that is if she had a prior history of working. I saw somebody with like a master's degree, and this lady was crying in court, but eventually they're just like, you have a master's degree, how come you're not working or making any money, So they imputed some income onto her, which was pretty rare. So that will depend on custody, but for the most part, most of those orders I've seen were a lot easier to deal with. That's just my experience.
I'm just curious, on average, the percent difference, if they're close to the same.
If it's close to the same, it all depends on, because now custody is the deciding factor.
What if they get semi-fair?
If it's like 50-50?
50-50 or close?
It
doesn't have to be 51%, so someone makes in Texas at least. I talked to
on the California guideline, they will put 51% and 49%, even if it's actually 50-50.
Okay.
Sometimes I have seen them do that. But just because it's 50, if it's 50-50 and they're each making $8,000, let's say, it's zero child support. If she's a housewife and he's making $8,000, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's going to be a little bit less than the 24%. It's still going to be over half that though. So it'll probably be around like 15 to 20%.
Okay.
Just depending.
But over time, that's going to add up.
Yeah, it's still gonna. It's still a lot. I saw this case, and this guy made a big mistake. It was actually a police officer. They make pretty good money, depending on where they are, 10 to 15 a month. I think he was around 8 to 10, somewhere there, I think. And he went to a different state and ended up knocking somebody up on a one-night stand. And so he's at home with his wife and kids, and they have a mortgage, and his wife stay at home, so he's paying everything.
Wait, so who did he knock up? It wasn't the wife, it was like a side chick.
Yeah. It was in a different, I can't remember where it was, but he went somewhere, and basically it happened that California had to make the order. So, looking at the math on this case, if this guy makes 8 to 10 grand or whatever, they have a mortgage that's like, $2,500 a month. So take taxes away, take the mortgage away, take this away. And then all of a sudden, so he's not paying any child support to anybody, which means this is the first child support order, which means it's going to be like that max amount of 20. He's got 0% custody. He didn't even know this kid existed until we opened the case. So they're taking like it's going to be a significant amount where he might not even be able to pay his bills for his family. So, that's the game that they're playing. You'd see stuff like that. And I don't know. So as a guy that's worked there before, I can't get it out of my mind to not be doing, like if I go to a wedding and I might just, okay, so what do they do? That's interesting. And then in my brain, I'm doing all this math, and I'm not, God bless them, I hope the marriage lasts forever. But, I was thinking, okay, what happens if, But in the dowry system, this is stuff they were thinking about. This is a front-end deal for a long-term monogamous marriage. Nowadays, I think and this is where I think red pill stuff is good, because it really helps out with intersexual dynamics, or if you look at it from the MGTOW side and all this kind of stuff. That's interesting. I think red pill at its best helps men maximize short-term options. And you can have a casual relationship with somebody for 15 years. I would still consider that a short-term, low-leverage thing. But when it comes into this long-term, let's have kids and now leverage ourselves and invest ourselves into it, nobody really has a good solution for that. Red pill, they always used to say, too, even with the red pillars on Reddit, there used to be married TRP, and they said guys who were married had the hardest version of red pill.
Yeah.
They had it the toughest, basically. And you can apply some of that stuff, and it may work, but for a lot of people, it's not going to work. And for a lot of people, you're not going to be this extremely rich person that can bounce back or whatever. You're going to be normal.
Have more of a risk if you do the trad thing and have a bunch of kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can end up with, one kid will be about 25%. That's what we're talking about. 2 kids will be about like 40%. And then,
holy shit.
Yeah.
40%
of the net income. And then
all the guys are going to be like, I'm 1 kid.
Yeah, then it'll hit like 55, and then it'll eventually hit some maximum. But at that point, there was a guy.
It goes up to 55%. That is so insane.
It reaches some maximum.
That's pre-tax or?
Well, that's net.
What?
The amount of child support, that percentage applies to their net earnings. So The calculator, at least the California one, takes out, it does the taxes. So you'll put in your dependents and stuff like that. There was a case, and I swear to God, we used to show this I became a trainer for a little bit too. But even when I got hired on, the lady who was training me, she was really funny. She would always tell me, she's just like, if you're ever gonna get married, ask for their credit report. You better ask for their credit report.
Okay.
Anyways, that's just funny. That's good advice though.
Yeah.
But she had this specific case, and this guy, I swear to God, he had like at least 14 or 15 cases, and some of them with multiple kids on it. This guy was legendary amongst the office. And the thing was like, he worked like some normal job. So child support had no choice but to just try to get a percentage based off however this calculator could, because they could only get so much out of this one turnip.
Okay.
And so some of the kids would have like a $12 order. Some would be getting $3 a month. Some of them had a prior one.
No way.
Yeah, but this guy, he was going to be a lifer. I mean, because some of them, he owed hundreds of thousands. There was no way he was ever going to be able to pay this off. And you can't bankrupt the debt. It was just, but he would pay his payments. We'd have to work and say, okay, well, this is your paycheck. You got to at least pay us this much. And somehow he was doing that, so.
As most of you know, I have been fighting on the front lines of the simp epidemic for years, but I need to tell you about a quiet weapon being ratcheted up against men that is rarely talked about. It's not just the relentless anti-masculinity propaganda and OnlyFans hoes causing the societal issues that we discuss on this show. Did you know that the average city's tap water contains trace pharmaceuticals and endocrine disruptors? This often includes estrogen from birth control. The average adult consumes a credit card worth of plastic every single week. That's 5 grams of plastic a week on average. So it's no wonder that the average male's testosterone is half of what the average was 50 years ago. Testosterone levels decline 1% a year, and without a course correction, we are headed towards extinction. No matter how based you are, you need to be naturally boosting your testosterone. My friends at Chalk, CHOQ.com, are on a mission to save mankind from extinction by boosting your vitality. Chalk's Male Vitality Stack contains premium and potent herbs clinically studied to naturally boost your testosterone levels, sperm count, and overall vitality. Just one of the many ingredients in the Male Vitality Stack was studied in double-blind human clinical trials to boost total testosterone 20% in 90 days. When you boost your testosterone, you'll have more mental clarity, you're more capable of making decisions and taking risks. Having high testosterone will also affect your pheromones, so women will find you more attractive subconsciously. Get the Chalk Male Vitality Stack right now on Chalk.com. That's CHOQ.com. Use my name Pearl as your coupon code and you'll get 25% off site-wide on Chalk.com. That's CHOQ.com. My name Pearl is the discount code.